Hey there, this is Renessa Boley Layne, and welcome to another conversation on creating your perfect work. If you follow me, you know that I am all about equipping you to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work you love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing a big idea to life. And so today, man, I'm super excited about this conversation. We're just going to talk about a life well lived and what that means and what it looks like and how, if I can turn off my phone, what it means, what it looks like, and how you begin to think about the decisions that you make in your own life around who you want to be and the impact that you want to have. And so the guest that I have on the conversation today is Suzanne Grant. And I'm going to tell you in a moment why I think she's super amazing, but I just want to kind of give you a sense for her background, what she's done. Suzanne is a Canadian veteran, so she's a military woman with a communications, engineering, and intelligence background, which means that she's super smart. In 2013, she represented Startup Canada at President Obama's Global Entrepreneurial Summit. She's also co-founder of an award-winning state-of-the-art brain-machine interface med tech company called iBionics. More than that, Success Insights has cited her as the entrepreneur to watch in 2019. The list goes on and on and on and on and on about what she's accomplished. So if you are kind of entrepreneurial, nerdy, techie, that kind of thing, you're going to eat her up. But if that's not you, if you're just all about career and this and that, the gems that she's going to share are going to be awesome. So that's kind of the public bio, but let me share with you why I really wanted Suzanne on this interview series. First of all, she's got a heart of gold. She's a ton of fun, super down to earth, and you're going to hear that even in the conversations. Like, you're going to feel like that's your girl. But more than that, I'm reminded of something that happened to me. It was like literally 20 years ago. I went on a date. I went on a date with this guy 20 years ago, and he was a West Point grad, so the U.S. Military Academy here in the States. And our date was to go to this bicentennial celebration at West Point. So I was like, oh, and I'm a military girl, and so all kinds of pomp and circumstance associated with the military, I was all for that. So we go to this bicentennial, and there was a keynote speaker there. And I don't even remember what the guy said, but I was reading his bio as he was talking, and he was a Heisman Trophy winner. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a Bronze Star guy in the war, which means he was pretty brave. He was a paratrooper. He went off to be a Rhodes Scholar. He had a 20-year military career as a brigadier. He ended his career as a brigadier general. He then went into iBanking and management consulting, and then did a run for Senate. And I'm sitting here reading about this guy, and I was like, how many lives did you live? Like, what did you do? And I remember being so inspired by that I kept the brochure with his bio, and I still have it to this day. And at the time, I was like maybe 25. But I just remember, like, man, this guy did so much with his life. And when I had the conversation with Suzanne, that's how I felt about her. I was like, what did you do? Like, how much time do you have in a day? And so the reason why I wanted her on this conversation is, as we talk about creating perfect work, and perfect work doesn't mean that all things are perfect. Perfect work means that you're just contributing in your career, your business, and in the world in a way that's meaningful for you, that's centered around how you're designed to be, in the world. And I think she just embodies that. And you're going to hear so much about her life, from military to, uprooting her kids and going to the Middle East to being a serial entrepreneur. And you're going to get gems from her life about how to make decisions about your own so that it's meaningful and it's impactful and you're doing great work. And I think that you're just going to be inspired and blessed by that. And that's why I wanted her on this interview series. So with that, Suzanne, I want to just welcome you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. And wow, those are really high expectations.
They're real, they're true. And I wanted to share it because sometimes we're just in the business of living life, and what seems common to us, we don't realize is uncommon to other people. And so I wanted to give you your props and your just due, because
thank you.
just stepping up every day and doing what's passionate and having the courage to stand out and push the envelope and do new things and do bolder things, it's inspiring to people. And it deserves to have a platform, and it deserves to be heard, and we get to learn from you. And so I'm really, really excited about that.
Great.
So that being said, I wanted, because the conversation is about perfect work, I always like to give, people an opportunity to see, hear, and feel what that looks like. And so you've done lots of things in your career. We're going to talk about, that and unpack your life. But how do you know that the work that you're doing right now, because right now you're the CEO of the Canadian Advanced Technology Alliance, and we'll talk about what that is. Actually, why don't you tell us about what that is so people get a context, and then I'm gonna unpack it a little bit.
Sure. So a few months ago, I was invited in to take over as CEO of the Canadian Advanced Technology Alliance, and this organization has been around. It started really almost 50 years ago in Canada, where technology people said, we're really the minority here. We need to band together. A lot has changed since then, and I stepped in unexpectedly. The previous CEO had passed away, and I've brought my entrepreneurial take to it, and that really is, what can an industry alliance that is designed for technology business people do for that tribe in the next decade. So, I bring my own experiences to that, and my mantras of the art of the possible and design for human. And what I'm working at doing is helping Canadian business companies, people working in those companies, to grow and to meet their full potential. We're in Canada, we kind of see ourselves as a little bit of the underdog compared to the United States. That's not an accurate assessment of Canadians. We're really very strong, but we have this sort of humble side to us, and we can learn from our American neighbors how to be a little bit more, what do we call it? Bring a little bit more swagger to our game. Let's put it that way.
Tons of swagger. So again, as we think about perfect work, and this idea of doing the right work at the right time, how do you know that the work that you're doing now, stepping into this space as the CEO of a nonprofit, coming from a technology background, an entrepreneurial background, like it's certainly in some ways a pivot, but how do you know that it's perfect work for you right now?
So what a fantastic question. I think for a very, very long time in my life, I've always looked at contributing purposeful work. Mm-hmm. And, I'm very aware, I'm 55 years old. So I plan to work for another 20 years or so, or maybe longer. Mm-hmm. But as you get to this stage in your life, you also really want to make things matter. And my generation is interested in, paving that pathway and leaving a better world for the next generation. So I go back to my own mantras, the art of the possible and solve for human, when I look for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And that is, am I doing something that where I find some type of gravitational attraction? Am I finding a tribe? Does it matter to people? And what's the outcome? What difference, what impact can I actually make? For me, my job is never about my salary. We need those things. That's so important so that we have a roof over our head. Yep. We can look after our children. We can we can sustain ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can, we live an abundant life in the relationships we have around us. Mm-hmm. And so when I thought about taking on this unexpected role as the CEO of CATA, the first thing that I thought about was, in my experiences growing businesses, the challenges that I banged up against, and how can I help tear down some of those obstacles for others. Mm-hmm. So for me, I guess I come from this long background of service. Okay. So I started as a veteran, serving my nation. Now today, it might sound corny, but it's like serving my tribe. How can I just help lift up those around me? Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk a bit more about service in a moment. But what's interesting about even this role, you went from volunteer in this organization to CEO. of the organization, like,
Yeah.
and there wasn't a whole lot of stepping stones in between. How did that happen?
There wasn't a lot of time either. I guess this is one of those instances of just being in a place, in a time. So, I had joined CATA as an entrepreneur residence, and I was working on a declaration for inclusivity and diversity within tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very passionate about that. I always have been. And it just happened that the CEO, who I had met only 10 days before I was invited to jump in, he had, or I guess he passed away 10 days after I met him. He was away on vacation. He just passed away, and they needed somebody to lead, and they were looking for an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was known to some of the board members. So they invited me because I was an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And I have to mention that my background does go beyond technology.
Mm-hmm.
So in the military, I worked in technology. My last company, I worked in technology. But that time that I spent in the Middle East, I actually built a strategic communications agency, and I was working in design and management consulting, training, experiential marketing, and publishing. Very different environment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so how then did you get tapped to be CEO though?
I just
to do some work based on your background, and then, but that's a whole different thing from being the successor to unexpectedly to a CEO that passes away.
Well, I had tapped the board, and I had said, okay, as a volunteer here, I see that the organization, the volunteers, everybody's waiting to see what's going to happen. So you're going to have to like make some announcements or let people know what the direction of this organization is going to be without the CEO, who had been just a formidable, just a massive force in so many ways. So I was on their mind, and they had to move fast.
Mm-hmm.
They really couldn't leave the organization rudderless.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was top of mind, and I was the entrepreneurial person around in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those board members also happened to be my, I call him my career mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I had gone to him earlier, and I'd said, I've been an entrepreneur for all these years, and my next step is going to be looking for a job, and I don't know how to look for a job as a CEO. I've been a CEO for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he was aware that I also was looking for something. This wasn't what I was looking for,
Mm-hmm.
or it wasn't what I had defined myself to be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew I was available, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. That's part of it too.
Let me ask you this,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's interesting. As oftentimes we hear people going from being in a career or a job and stepping into entrepreneurship. You were doing the reverse. And for some people, there's a stigma associated with, I'm coming out of entrepreneurship to kind of go back to being shackled. I don't necessarily see it that way. But for you, what was the rationale for a long story history in entrepreneurship to deciding that you wanted to go into a career?
Right. So the thing about entrepreneurship is there's two sides to it. People like to be entrepreneurs because they like to have that sort of freedom to make their own choices,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little bit of a fallacy, because we all have bosses. If you're an entrepreneur, you have many bosses who are called clients.
Yep.
Right?
That's right.
So that's a little bit of the dream. The other piece of that is, entrepreneurs that I know, and myself included, are people that come and want to change something, and they feel passionate about something. And a lot of entrepreneurs, as they cycle through their organization. So I exited my medtech company in, I guess almost a year ago. So you put so much into your business, 3 to 5 years. Sometimes people will be there for 10 years. They're so focused on that. And when they come up out the other side and they exit, they sell their company, however they find themselves with this new opportunity in front of them, there's usually a period of 6 to 12 months where people do something that's called exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I wanted to go into a role where I could get back to deal making. I really like doing deal making, and when I was building a med tech company, that was really more about building out a 10-year vision for a company, and also looking for the investment that would support that. I really like, I wanted to get back to my roots in my strategic comms agency, where I was doing that day-to-day operational, getting deals done, moving things along, making stuff happen at a little bit different pace. But you know, you go through so much as an entrepreneur. You've got to, before you jump into that, it's got to be something that matters so intensely to you that it's worth it. So a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, some of them might think this is what I want to do next, but a lot of us are like, okay, I've just put my life and soul into this the last 5 to 10 years. What makes sense for me to do next? And you know all the things that can go wrong. So I think the more companies that you've been in, the more selective you get about where you're going to put that entrepreneurial energy. And so, because we're always searching, we're always in that discovery of where can I jump back into being an entrepreneur. But in the meantime, I want to go in and get that stability of having a job.
Mm-hmm. What I find interesting about you, how do I say it? I think for some people that are listening in, when it comes to work, whether it's career, business, whatever, there is this sense of permanence and attachment to that path. Like, okay, if I'm going to build my business, this is going to be my thing, you know, forever. Or if I'm going to be in a certain direction in my career, like that's who I'm going to be, and that's how I'm going to be for, you know, for the long haul. And obviously not everyone is that way. But as we look at your path, and everybody that's listening hasn't been privy to the wholeness of your path, but you have pivoted in so many different directions. There's connecting threads, but they're different directions. And when you talk, it doesn't sound like you have this sense of attachment to, okay, well, I'm on this path, or I'm on this project, and I've got to be here forever. Like, you really seem to pull up and make decisions at different points in time to kind of get a sense for, well, what do I want now? Or what experience do I have now? Or what impact do I want to have now? And then you're willing to shift and morph to be able to do that. Is my sense correct?
You're absolutely right. It's certainly not the simplest path. I guess you could say what's in common, the thread that runs through there is, so first of all, I've been a CEO for like 20 years, right? And what's the role of the CEO? You know, as a CEO, you're looking at what are all of the dots in the universe to connect, and you've got your fingers into every single piece of every discipline inside of your organization. So you really have that big picture thinking. One, and the other thing is I'm an absolute challenge junkie, and I love building. I love the chase of taking, I guess, going back to I have a degree in physics. So in physics, you know, what you do is you're asked to, okay, so what's a hypothesis? What's a theory? And then you work through the steps, and then you prove that theory. So I applied that to marketing when I did my strategic communications agency. I did that for 10 years. I loved it. And I also got to the point where I wasn't going to grow more. There wasn't much more I could do. I had peaked there. And I was very comfortable having a good time, which isn't a good place to be as a business person. And it was time for me to move back home to Canada. So I left that. But the way I thought about each of the chapters of my life, the first one being in communications, electronics in the military, then being abroad, running businesses, mainly revolving around communications, and then coming home, helping other people build their businesses, and then I built my own. I've always thought of building on what I've learned, and that my experience is my capital. And I want to take that to the next level. So when I came back from the Middle East, I wanted to do something, all of those skills I had built up, I wanted to apply them to something bigger. And that's why I jumped into, when I had the opportunity, I jumped into this company that was addressing blindness because it could help more people. And then that is so completely, utterly absorbing. When I came out of that, it was like, okay, I need to take a breather. I can't keep with that pace. So, where we apply our passion and our energy and our skills also need to serve us in where we are in our lives, in our lives as well. So, I need to breathe and take it down a notch for a little while before I jump right back into that entrepreneurship. It's not sustainable. It is exhausting,
I think that's such an interesting point, though, because I'm not sure that we all give ourselves permission to navigate and direct our careers that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a lot of us, there could be this sense of this fear of loss, like, well, okay, if I get off of this fast track or if I get off of this train, then somehow I'm going to get left behind. And understanding, and I think that for some of us, there are times where we should make different decisions in our career to support our life or to support a stage of life that we're in. But how do you deal with, and it could just be a mindset issue or a scarcity kind of, thing, but how do you deal with the fear of, oh my gosh, if I don't stay at this frenzied pace, somehow I'm going to miss opportunities or get left behind or what have you?
I guess it goes back to your own values and what you're looking to get out of where you put your professional energy, right? So for me, titles aren't really all that important. And it's quite funny. I think I was invited to speak a couple years ago on a panel that said, making it to the top. And I said, what top? There's no top. Like, CEOs, leaders, we're in the middle. Like, we serve people. We're doing things for others. We're not at the top of anything. And the main thing for me is always I do need to be in some leadership role. In other words, I think, 55 years, I've done so many things. I want to be able to share some of that and help bring other people up. But it's not comfortable every time I make a shift. So when I went from being in the military, they told me, why are you leaving? We fast-tracked you to become a general. I said, well, it doesn't seem to me, it no longer felt challenging. It's like, okay, you've set the track for me. That mystery and the curiosity was kind of gone. But then when I stepped into the Middle East as a complete unknown entity, and my entire CV didn't matter because nobody understood the value of having been in a Canadian military as opposed to conscripts in the Middle East. But stepping through it's scary for me. I won't say that I'm comfortable with it because I'm a person who likes to be on the top of my game. And when you step into something new, you're not. But then all of the experience that opportunity gives you, it just makes you're actually every few years when you're making those shifts, you come out of those at just a completely different level with respect to how you think about things. So I like that personal growth piece, I guess. I like challenging myself. For this particular role, I stepped into it just because I felt that somebody needed to do it and it needed to be done. And I was there, so let's go.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because on the surface, one would think that you're very comfortable with change and uncertainty and all of that. Because what you haven't said about your switch from military and then going into the Middle East is that you had a 5-year-old and a 5-month-old in tow. When you and your husband picked up everything and moved from Canada and, uprooted yourselves and moved to the Middle East. So, and I want to talk a little bit about that experience in a moment, but first, it is true that when we step into something new, we're not at the top of our game because it's new. Even if we have some aptitude or some natural ability for it, it's still new. And for some people, there's a significance that comes with being at the top of your game that is hard to relinquish and be a student all over again to try something new. But you said in a conversation that we had offline that if something is important enough, you'll face the fear. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of fear when it comes to pivoting, and everyone that's listening in on this call is thinking about some sort of shift, whether it's a shift in career, whether it's a shift into entrepreneurship, whether they've got a message or this movement that they're trying to bring to the marketplace. How do you deal with the fear? How do you step into the uncertainty? Because you've done it over and over and over again, and you've done it at pretty, the stakes were fairly high.
Yeah.
Professionally. How do you deal with that fear?
I think that's great. And I believe for myself, the fear comes from, failing and falling on my face. Mm-hmm. This is something that's really scary. And when you start out in something really new, you're just, you're not going to get it right all the time. You are going to make mistakes. One of the, I think self-awareness and self-reflection and taking time to do that is so very important. And how I move through that is one, I make sure that I have conviction for that purpose that I'm entering into. That helps me move through the fear. The other thing that's always helped me is, it doesn't matter if 80 people out of 100 don't like or agree with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. It's those 20 people that really see it and see you in the role and believe in you, that give you the energy. And, from my old days in like deal making and making sales, I didn't expect when I went to bring in a new client that 100 out of 100 were going to come in. Mm-hmm. Early days, if I got 20 out of 100 sign up, I was doing good. And then as I became that expert, I moved the bar up to 80. So if you're going into something new and you don't have champions around you, I think it's going to be really hard to find that positive energy. Mm-hmm. For me, in the case of CATA, it is very new, very, very new role for me. And I have this fantastic board that mm-hmm. has full confidence in me. And if they make a decision, they'll listen to me. And even after a decision is made, if I come back to them and I say, we might want to hold off on this for this reason, they respect my voice and they listen to me. And I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. I think that the courage, we surpass that courage by having people around us who aren't only our cheerleaders, like they'll say, hey, they'll give it to you straight. I don't think you're on the right track, but I don't think you can do anything alone. I guess that's what's important. That's an important piece.
Got it.
And I get really energized by my team. Always my energy comes from my team and the people that they're there on board working with me. So, when I started iBionics, this brain machine interface a little chip that was surgically placed in the eye to help blind people see, things would happen like, I'd go and I'd look for advisors, and then all of a sudden I found people joining the team and want to be part of the project. Mm-hmm. It's not everybody that is visionary and sees that you're going in the right direction. So, I mean, you can believe in yourself, but I think you have to believe in the mission first. Mm. I mean, you have to believe in yourself, but the mission, you have to see yourself in those shoes of leading that mission.
I think it's an interesting point, because I've talked to a lot of women, and for a number of them, what shifted for them, or what made it evident that they needed to make a shift, was being able to look down the horizon at whatever the career path was, or whatever was coming down the pike, and not wanting what they saw. And I remember in my days of management consulting early on in my career, I was given a mentor who was a principal in the company, and it was all about, we're going to take this woman and mentor this other young woman, and she was awesome and I appreciated her. But when I saw her path, there was nothing about it that I wanted, And I do think that when we think about the world of work, it isn't just, what's the next step? Can I be a director or senior director or VP or whatnot? It really is, can I see myself down the road? Is this who I want to be? Is this work that I'm proud of? Is this where I want to give my lifeblood? And if that answer comes back less than a resounding yes, there's some more, as you would say, self-reflection that may need to happen there.
Yeah, and it might be, I mean, we don't always have the luxury to make the choices for the next step to be exactly what we want it to be either. Sometimes you have to have a longer term path and to say, okay, well, I need this right now to accommodate, it accommodates 2 out of the 5 most important things about my next step, but I have to make a move. I can't afford to not be, for whatever reason. Yeah. Right? So that's okay, but I know where I want to go. I know what's interesting to me. And what's always happened in my brain is that I've always had 4 or 5 different things that were really interesting to me, and trends that I saw, and things that I kind of planted in the back of my mind. Like, for example, years before I got into this medtech company, I had recognized that there was a lot of changes that needed to happen in healthcare. And that was an opportunity. And that was interesting because you're putting your energy into something that's helping a lot of others. But I had no idea how to get into that. And I didn't even try. But when the opportunity came along, I had already thought it through. So, we need this balance of intention and being opportunistic, open to new opportunities. And I also really strongly believe, this is something I started way back when I was getting ready to leave the military. I wanted to get into business. I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted. So I read that book, I think it's still around, called What Color Is Your Parachute? And I took a lot of time for self-reflection. And every time that I've been in a change of circumstance, I've spent the time doing that reflection so I can understand, what did I like out of that? What do I want to take forward? What do I want to try again? What are some areas I want to explore? I think we owe ourselves that, right? Because when we show up with, and we really care about what we're doing, so much easier to perform. It doesn't mean it's less scary, but the energy level is 150% instead of dragging yourself through tasks that just have to be done.
Yeah. The one word that stood out to me when I spoke with you initially was this idea of you being very self-aware. And have you all, you're able to, because I'm looking at the notes from our very first conversation, and I don't remember what we were talking about. I think I was asking you to connect the dots between the different roles, that you've undertaken across, 20 years or whatever. And you were like, I'm a challenge junkie, I'm creative, and I like to build things. And you actually said that a few moments ago as well. So you're able to, in sound bites, really be able to express either your values, like what's important to you, your desire for what's next, whether you know how to get it or not, and the value that you bring to whatever situation you happen to be in. Like, you understand why you've been selected as CEO for CAT. Like, it's not like, I don't know why they chose me. Like, you really get what you bring to the table and all of that. So there's a tremendous amount of self-awareness there, which I think allows you to recognize opportunity when it comes. Because sometimes opportunity's there and we don't see it as such, right? How would you advise folks that are listening, on the conversation, to be able to develop that self-awareness for themselves?
I can tell you, I'm not sure. I can tell you how I did it. So, when I was 14, 15, I was the shyest person in the room. I just would not say boo. I had great ideas, one-on-one. I could articulate my ideas. I knew what I believed in. I would go for it. And at the same time, I knew if I didn't speak up that I was just going to be a wallflower forever. So I think dealing with my own sort of lack of confidence is what helped me push through. So I read, what was it? How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I started to understand. So I somehow, and maybe it started there, I have this great fascination around human behavior. And when we challenge ourselves, we also mess up, and we need to self-reflect and have conversations with ourselves about, would I handle that differently? What did I learn? What are lessons learned? This is maybe something I picked up from the military that I pull through with my other projects that I've done, getting my team around and doing, and my suppliers and doing lessons learned. And I guess I do that with myself as well. It could just be personality, but I think it's important. And I'm not, if you talk about that and then you put me in a job interview, like, I'm miserable. I can't do job interviews. I can't do everything. I'm terrible. I can get the job interview, but I haven't had very many. Hey, we loved you in that job interview. Are you going to come and work for us? I don't fit everywhere. I know I'm a bit odd, so I have to figure out how I do fit. But I don't know. I don't know how I would, I think something that I could do more of is, ask people for feedback. I think I do it a little bit, but I think I could do that more. How do other people see you? And then how does that line up with how you've seen yourself? And maybe that's also something I've developed because I've gone from these blank slate situations where I'm completely an unknown. So I have to actually think about, how do I present myself as me without all of my titles? I don't know. It's a tough question. I don't have a good answer for it, actually.
Yeah, you have a decent answer for it. It was good.
Okay.
So are you very attached to the feedback that you get from that self-reflection? So for instance, like, you go out there, you do something, and obviously sometimes you do it well, but when we start, sometimes we don't do it so well. We kind of fumble our way into mastery a little bit. And then when you're sitting there and you're having to reflect on, would I have done that conversation differently? What would I say? All of that. Some people can struggle with that because the feedback, if it's not great, whether it's feedback from themselves or other people, they can take it really hard. Other people look at it as just that. It's feedback, it's data, it's telling me what to do next or how to be different. And there isn't really an attachment emotionally from a self-worth perspective. For you, how do you view your feedback and your self-reflection and all of that kind of stuff?
I think that's really challenging. I think you almost need a therapist for that. And that's not something that I've done. It's probably something that I should have done, talk to a therapist, because you are you, and you can have a conversation with yourself, like, here's some of your weaknesses. How are you gonna work on that? I think as a leader, we need to be careful about how we communicate things, because one thing that I've learned, well, I'll give you an example. In my business in the Middle East, I had 12 people working for me at the Art of Business. 9 of them came straight from their home countries. And I had come from this environment where I was being fast-tracked to be general. I thought I was this amazing leader. In that context, I was. In this context, I was falling on my face because my director of training, she came straight out of Australia, and her expectations of me as a leader were very different than my Nepalese driver, different than my Filipino, different from my UK events manager. I had to figure out what their impressions were of a leader and what they needed from a leader. And it was all so different, and how I could deliver that and be a consistent human. And I also had, one of the biggest things that I've done with my teams along that line is given myself permission, let them know that I'm going to mess up sometimes. I'm a human. I'm going to try my best, but I won't always deliver 100%. So we're in this together. Let's sort that out. But back to the question about comments, and when you're an entrepreneur or when you're selling something, you'll get a lot of pushback comments. Early days of iBionics, it was particularly challenging because this is a massive project that we raised $5 million to get us to preclinical trials, but it was very big dream, big technology, a big play. And I got a lot of feedback that was very negative, and I unpacked it. And what I realized was some of it was truthful, but in a lot of instances, what I was actually hearing from people was more about how they saw themselves and the reasons why they couldn't take on the role that I was doing than about the value of the project itself. Mm-hmm. So I think you do need to be able to differentiate where that feedback's coming from. If I go to a meeting with a new partner or stakeholder, and I have a board director with me, sometimes I have the luxury to have somebody come along with me. At the end of the meeting, I'll always ask, so do you have notes? Because I can't see myself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a different perspective, and I'm happy to get them. But I'll cage it a little bit with, do you have notes? Please tell me. But also know I might not be able to change it because we also have our style and our habits. Can we change all of it? I'm not sure. But I'm less about trying to be perfect and more about working to be effective. Mm-hmm. Right? And kind. I think we need to be aware of the feelings of others. Yeah. I think we learn a lot when we have conflict with others. That's when we learn the most about ourselves. And we have to talk it through and say, okay, well, why did you feel that way? Mm-hmm. I think that's where we learn the most, actually.
Yeah. And I think there's a detachment to the feedback or a detachment to the interaction that then allows us to be able to evaluate it and figure out what part of this do I keep.
Yeah.
Yes, I can change that. That would make me more effective or better able to connect or whatnot. And what can I disregard? Because I think a lot of us, we get crippled, or we can get crippled by the feedback if it's not glowing, right?
Well, where's it coming from? Is somebody telling you they would do things differently, which is fine? Mm-hmm. Is somebody giving you their opinion because they don't act, it's not clear to them where you're going, and they're talking about something else? Could you do something better? All of those things are there, and especially when we're involved in partnering or deal making, it's so nuanced. Like every single person, every single conversation is unique, and some of them, if we were to go back and do them again, we would do them differently, and some of them are perfect. Rarely, but very often they're good enough as well.
So you talk about, one of your mantras is this idea of the art of possibility. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. What is that?
For some strange reason, this is just an innate sense inside of me that almost everything is possible with time and money. Time and money aren't always possible to get, mm-hmm. but there's very few things that you can't change. And I don't know where it comes from, but it's just the way my brain works. And when I see a process, or I'm just walking around in life and I see how something is annoying or could be better, my mind just always goes to, if we just did this, then it could be better. And we have the ability, if we work together, to change so many things in this world. Mm-hmm. It's just the way I think.
Mm-hmm. And how can we, those that are listening to you, apply the art of possibility to creating work that we love, that's meaningful, that's impactful, that, how do we take that and apply it here?
There are actually so many ways that we can change our environment. So, if you're working in a job and nobody's taking you seriously, or you don't say, you're not being seen,
Mhm.
So what can you do about that? Maybe you're the 9 to 5 piece of that job. Maybe you don't feel that you're empowered to do a lot about that particular role that you're in, or maybe your supervisor is in your way. But sometimes there's things that you can do that are like extracurricular. You can do them on your own time, or you can do them within your organization. Even a volunteer campaign where you pull your team together. What I used to do in the military, there were lots of things about that weren't a good fit for me. So I used to rebel a little bit and go to morning physical training and get everybody to dress silly. Just like, just how can you put yourself into your environment? How can you apply the art of the possible? Just think through, if there were no barriers,
Mhm.
then think without the barriers.
Mhm.
Brainstorm. Don't think, and this is how I ran my brainstorming in the art of business. We used to say, let's just throw everything on the table and let's not think about the reasons why it won't work. Let's put all the ideas out there of how we could change something to make it better. And then we'll look at what the practical plan is. But just move through different modes of thinking
Mhm.
where you don't think things through to the very end of all the reasons something won't work.
Mhm.
Because there's a million reasons that almost everything won't work. And try to think about what are the reasons, or how could this work?
Mhm.
How
Yeah.
could you just make it different if there weren't the barriers? So just shifting your thought process in and out of sort of practicality to not dreaming, but just the art of the
Yeah.
possible,
What's
right?
possible?
What if we just did this? What would we want to go there? What if we just tried this way or that way? What could it look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an important point, I think, for folks that are listening, because when we are bogged down in places we don't want to be, or in roles we don't want, or whatnot, we lose that sense of possibility, and we live in the place of what is or what has been.
Yeah.
And when we're able to open up, whether that's getting with a couple other people and be like, what could I do?
Barriers,
What is
right?
an option? Let's not figure out if it's valid or invalid, but just kind of what is possible. You'd be surprised at what doors can actually open up.
And the surprise doors.
Mhm.
And barriers can get heavy. They can get really heavy and they can weight you down. I completely get that. I think another important thing is to have people in your life that are lighter, and
Mhm.
not that they're not serious, find some people in your life that believe in the art of the possible, and have some conversations with them about your possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, um, thank you for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much.
It's a perfect place to end a little period on what's possible. But your life is inspiring, and it's fascinating, and it's challenging in a lot of ways. And I'm excited about the work that you're doing,
Thank
and
you.
the impact that you're making at this stage through technology. But it's changing lives in so many ways, whether it's diversity and inclusion, and all of those things that you're allowing your gifts to be harnessed in a really, really powerful way. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think on behalf of Suzanne and myself, for those of you that are listening, we want to wish you the absolute best. And we want to inspire you to think about what's possible in your world, what's possible in that dream career, what's possible in the business that's been whispering in your heart for however long, what's possible about the message that you want to bring out into the world as well. And so with that, have a fantastic rest of the day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for listening. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.